as we dive into tier one, some of those guys at the top of tier one are popped up very early in these best ball drafts as well. Tier one, potential to be the wide receiver one. Now, it's important, and most of you guys probably realize this because you're not fantasy football novices or anything like that. We're talking about the wide receiver one, not a wide receiver one. This is going to come up in some of the other tiers. When we say the wide receiver one, we're talking about the guy to own. We're talking Cooper Kupp 2 years ago. The guy, the wide receiver one. And you can't start off any list where you're talking about guys that have the potential to be the wide receiver one without talking about Justin Jefferson. It's pretty much impossible not to believe in this guy, right?
How could you not? So far in his young career, only 3 seasons, the wide receiver 6, wide receiver 4, and then wide receiver 1. He's been nothing but excellence. He does it all at every layer of the field. There's no faults in this guy's game at all, and he's just only seemingly getting better by the year. You look at what he did last year. First in targets, first in receptions, first in receiving yards, 4th in touchdowns, and of course, as you hinted at, wide receiver 1 in points last year. Wasn't the wide receiver 1 in points per game. We're going to get to that guy in a minute, but there's no holes in this guy's game. He should go number 1 overall in early best ball drafts, in PPR leagues, and even in half PPR, you can consider him with CMC right there at the top, even in your redraft leagues. There's nothing to argue. I absolutely love this guy. It's going to be tough to overtake him, but truth, these next 4, and I'll just kind of whip through them because we got 27 names to get through, so I want to make sure we cover them all. Let's talk about the argument for how someone might overtake a throne that is so difficult to, so well defended here in Justin Jefferson. Well, Jamar Chase.
These next guys, you could totally make a case, even though I would fall down on Jefferson. But yeah, make your case for Chase. It's probably the same one I would make.
Yeah, he's my number 2. He's definitely the best case. And I mean, look no further than college when the two were on the field together with Joe Burrow at quarterback. Chase outproduced Justin Jefferson. I know we're at the NFL level, and I know their situations are vastly different with Chase contending with T. Higgins, but man, this guy is so talented. And what I noticed about Jamar Chase, it was really clearly when he first came in as a rookie, a 1A, 1B situation. You know, in their games played together, him and T. Higgins, ultimately, T. Higgins had 136 targets in those games together, and Jamar Chase had 140. So they were neck and neck. It was just right on pace to being a 1A, 1B, alternating wide receiver 1 weeks. We only saw Jamar Chase in his rookie year as a top 12 receiver in 5 of his 17 games. Now, some of those games were monsters, 55 points in your fantasy championship weeks. So the ceiling has always been very apparent with him, but the consistency was lacking. That did flip last year, and that's why I have some faith in Jamar Chase potentially overtaking Justin Jefferson, where he ended up finishing with 10-plus targets in 9 of his 12 games, 75% of the time. And that target share really became a wide receiver 1, Jamar Chase, wide receiver 2, Higgins. In their 9 games played together last year, Chase was on pace for 172 targets compared to 136 for Higgins. So we finally did see that divide, and ultimately on pace for 13.2 TDs, 1,413 yards, and 113 receptions. So he really did seem to separate, and that helped him find much more consistency last year. And I do think, again, 11.2 targets per game as a sophomore, 7.5 as a rookie. I don't think we've even come close to seeing the best, and that's yet to come with Jamar Chase. Over a full season, man, it could go absolutely bananas. So I love Jamar Chase entering this year as well. The best is yet to come. Definitely the best threat to the throne of Justin Jefferson in my opinion.
Can we just raise an eyebrow real quick to a college team with Joe Burrow throwing to Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson real quick?
And Terrace Marshall, I mean, he's not done much at the NFL level, but that's not a bad wide receiver.
Legit NFL player, though.
Exactly. So what a ridiculous season that was. Yeah, absolutely monster. But the other guy who, I mean, there's really only 2 other guys that I think have a legit claim. The next is Tyreek Hill, in my opinion, who's already come out and said this year, and his coach saying night and day of where Tyreek Hill was this year compared to last year in regards to the offense and his mindset on improving and being even better every day. That's pretty scary considering he caught 119 balls for 1,710 yards. Both were franchise records, top 3 wide receiver last year. And he's already come out. And you know when the season starts, one thing I always love is record chasing. And he's already come out and said, I want that 2,000 yards before I retire. Oh, baby. I love the idea of them just feeding this guy early, often. You saw how beautiful that system with Mike McDaniels, just getting these guys in space and letting their speed rip up and down the field. So if he's chasing records early on, we know how damn good Tyreek Hill is, how much of a game wrecker he is. He could absolutely overtake Jefferson as the wide receiver one this year.
Yeah, he's all questions, any questions, and obviously we knew what a talent he was. It's speed oriented, but I mean it's speed that's just like unparalleled, basically. Any questions we had about him were answered last year, because any of the this guy's Mahomes dependent. We'll see what happens when he goes somewhere when he doesn't have the best quarterback in the league throwing to him. Well, he did go somewhere, and he was incredible. And it also wasn't like he was like the target hog. There was another guy getting tons, getting peppered plenty. And Hill still ate a ton and just scored at will and put up huge yards. And so, yeah, I mean, there's certainly a world where this guy could end up wide receiver one. I wouldn't pick him over Jefferson. Probably wouldn't pick him over Chase. But yeah, absolutely. He's got that it factor. Real quick before we go on to number 4, Kevin says, "Love you boys. Can't wait for this season." Thank you so much, Kevin. That is
thanks for the support. A super chat already coming in early and often, and that's a good reminder. Get your questions in. Say your thanks. I mean, I appreciate that too. Yeah. But also get your questions in. That's why we go live. We want to answer all those questions. And if you don't want to super chat, a nice free way to support the boys is that thumbs up button. But I do want to wrap up too before we do our shameless self promotion here. The last guy, and I think anybody out there could guess who that number 4 potential threat is. You could guess it. It's Cooper Kupp. It has to be as a potential threat for the number 1, considering in back-to-back years, he's been the number 1 guy in fantasy points per game. And not that Allen Robinson's this monster. In fact, he was embarrassingly bad last year.
No, Allen Robinson is not this monster. You're right.
No.
Where are you going with this?
He's gone. And so even though he was nothing, there's still 80 targets right there. Gone and not replaced at all. They've added no one other than Puka Nacua, a rookie that, intriguing guy, impressing in early camp, but it's going to be the Cooper Kupp show. As long as he's out there, he's going to thrive. This is a great stat. He has, in his past 2 years, 65% of his games have been top 10, and only one of those games has been outside the top 24. Just the pinnacle of consistency each and every time he is out there. And the only risk seems to be injury. But you also look at his last 3 seasons before the last one, 48 of 49 games played through those 3 seasons. So I'm not overly worried about the injury concerns. Yeah, he's approaching 30 and there's that cliff that's kind of in the distance. I think that's far in the distance. And whether Matthew Stafford stays healthy or not, Cooper Kupp is QB proof in my opinion. That role is just such a layup. You got to love the guy, right?
I do love him. And I mean, I don't know, arguably the best wide receiver season we've ever seen. I don't know. And so I don't know. You said his only drawback is injury, and that certainly is the big one. I would argue that maybe I'm not sure he's quarterback proof. I like to think he's not, but I don't know. It depends. Who are you putting out there? Who's Stafford's backup right now?
I think it's Stetson Bennett, right? The guy from Georgia. He can distribute the rock. He'd be okay.
Maybe. I just healthy Stafford, which Stafford was banged up all last year. It pretty much seemed like he was never right. Healthy Stafford, healthy Kupp. This guy's going to be up here in contention. And you're right. When he has played, he's been unparalleled, consistent, better than any of these other guys, as a matter of fact. And it's he's the one guy. Even maybe Jefferson, I'd put in this category a little bit, but he's the one guy where it's just everyone on the field knows they're going to him. They go to him, and he still gets it. With Chase or something like that, it's they might go to Higgins. With Hill, it's they might go to Waddle. With Kupp, it's all right, it's 3rd and 8, and they're throwing the ball to Cooper Kupp, and he gets one for 10. It blows me away how many times I've seen that happen. It's incredible.
Yeah. 110%. Those are definitely the 4 guys that I think can contend for that number 1 overall spot. Although this next tier we're about to talk about, truth, the more I dug into them, I think these guys, especially the guy at the top, will have a shot. But let's talk about this tier.
Well, this tier 2, first round worthy. So we're talking about in snake draft situation, 12-team league. These are guys you can feel good. These next, I think, 3 guys that you can feel good taking in the first round. And when we say maybe wide receiver 1 upside, these guys are all wide receiver 1. We're talking about the wide receiver 1 once again. These are guys that might possibly have what it takes to squeak into that group. Little bit longer shots, but all quality wide receivers you'd be thrilled to have on your team. And of course, we're going to start with Stephon Diggs, who has just been a model of consistency and has won plenty of people fantasy leagues and has the quarterback that we unilaterally we're just like, yeah, he's the guy you want. So say something about Stephon Diggs that we haven't heard.
You said the model of consistency. Wide receiver 3, 7, and 4 across his last 3 years since joining the Bills and exploding alongside Allen. But the big thing, and we talked about this in the quarterback episode, I think people forgot about how freaking good Josh Allen was before that week 9 elbow injury where he really couldn't throw the deep ball. Well, unsurprisingly, Stephon Diggs was significantly better in those first 9 weeks as well. Now, on the season, 56% of his games were top 12. That is crazy consistency. That only Cooper Kupp across the last 2 seasons.
It would sound a lot more impressive if the last guy hadn't been 10% more.
I know. Unbelievable how impressive he is. But then you look at those first 9 weeks, again, so those 8 games, they had their bye week in week 7. 71% of the games, he was a wide receiver 1. He only had 2 games, so 2 of his 7 games outside the top 12, but 5 of 7. And in those 5 of 7, he went above 22 points in every single one of them, including a 44 point. So he still has the ceiling. He had that floor, and then he got hurt. But if you look at, this was legitimately Cooper Kupp level production, 24.7 points per game. Cooper Kupp in that ridiculous record-breaking season was 25.9 points per game. So really, really close in terms of how much dominance we saw out of Stephon Diggs. Again, people seem to forget how great this Bills offense was humming along in those first 8 weeks of the seasons before Josh Allen's injury. He was on pace for 175 targets, 134 catches, 1,855 yards, and 17 touchdowns. That is insane production. And sure, maybe the bad weather at the end of the year, he probably wouldn't have maintained that pace, but this definitely does suggest Stephon Diggs' ceiling is probably higher. He probably belongs in that above tier, to be honest, as a real threat, because this would have been the wide receiver 1, that pace, by 3 points. He beat Justin Jefferson's average last year when his first 3, when you consider only those first 8 weeks of the season when Josh Allen was fully healthy.
Yeah, numbers wise, you do make a good case for him maybe squeaking into that tier. Maybe next big board that might change.
I might have to update this.
But as we're going to go down this list just a little further, like you can kind of talk yourself into a couple of these guys. But you're right. Everything you say about Diggs, love Diggs, and you take the Allen injury into consideration. That guy's a top 2, top 3 last year, maybe even 1. Who knows?
Yeah.
But this guy, I'm sure you get a little excited when you think about this guy, right?
How can you not? A.J. Brown, last year's wide receiver 5. Weirdly, him and CeeDee Lamb actually have the exact same amount of points on the season, so they tied for wide receiver 5 together. I
hold A.J. Brown in so much higher regard than CeeDee Lamb.
I do too. I just love the player. He hadn't seen his career high in targets was 104 before last year. We see a big spike, 144, which we were predicting. Jalen Hurts' boy, your best friends off the field. You saw that rapport on the field carry over as well. Ranked 9th in targets, finished 5th in points, but 2nd in total touchdowns, 4th in receiving yards. An amazing smash debut for A.J. Brown with the Eagles. And it was, a lot of people have talked about him as a boomer bust guy, but 35% were top 12, 35% were top 24. So 70% of the time, you were getting really solid production from A.J. Brown. And even his busts, he had 1.7 and 6.2 day. The rest were around 11 to 14 points. So he was really, really consistent, solid. Yes, Devonta Smith caught more balls as a higher percentage guy, but he had more targets, A.J. Brown did, and just plays that bigger boom style role as well. So yeah, I love A.J. Brown. I only see it getting better in his 2nd year. They haven't really added any competition, so that rapport can only continue to grow. More of the same. No reason not to love A.J. Brown in 2023.
Right. You could talk yourself into him too.
Even this next guy, I think I could talk myself into.
The next guy, he might be the best of all of them.
Yeah. As a pure talent, maybe maybe still the best player in the league at the wide receiver position. Oh, you want to click? I think we're
over clicking each other here. Well, and of course I'm talking about Devontae Adams, who, when we talk about model of consistency. Oh, before I move on from A.J. Brown real quick, remember I said Tyreek Hill answered all the questions that I needed answered last year. I kind of feel the same way about A.J. Brown a little bit, which is just like, we had seen he was awesome and stuff like that, and then we saw him in a really lousy situation. And then it was like, okay, is this guy really so good that we can send him to decent to very good team in the Eagles, and he's just going to be this alpha guy everyone's expecting? The answer was a resounding yes.
Resounding.
So those questions were answered about him. And you can say the same thing about this guy. As great as he is, or I was going to say as great as he was, but is it great as he is? I mean, he put up just legendary numbers in Green Bay. There were always some, that would have had doubts. Just be like, is he really going to go to the Raiders and be that guy? And again, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wide receiver too in fantasy last year.
Not that Carr was a stiff or anything, but this isn't like some Hall of Fame first ballot guy. And he was incredible. Yeah. And so I don't see any reason why he's not going to be incredible again.
I'm 100% there with you. The model of consistency. We've said consistent for these other guys above him, and then you look at Adam. Wide receiver 1, 4, 1, 2, and 5 in his last 5. So he's been a top 5 receiver in 5 straight games in points per game and top 4 in total points.
And the 5, where he finished a dismal wide receiver 5, that was his first year in a new city with a new coach, with a new quarterback, and a new offense. So, you could forgive it. And a kind of not a great team, if I'm being honest.
No, shitty team, but first in total touchdowns among receivers, second in targets, first in total air yards, was getting deep. So I was a big fan. I think he might be getting the most disrespected of any receiver in these early drafts because he's fallen to the end of round 1, and sometimes I'm getting him even in round 2 right now. And I don't see any reason why he should be, given that we just saw him perform well with Carr. And Carr was actually shockingly QB 37 in deep passer rating, had, I think, only 2 deep touchdowns. They both went to Davante Adams. He wasn't a good deep ball thrower. A lot of misconnections here, actually, between Davante Adams and Derek Carr. And Jimmy G is definitely not a
ball thrower either.
No, right? He barely looks deep. So that is the risk, and maybe that is why he's starting to fall a bit. But it's not like this is a deep ball artist. Davante Adams can do everything and does everything as well as any receiver in the league. So yeah, he was a little boomier and bustier than you're kind of used to with him. It was either 47% of his games were top 12, so he boomed very, very often. 5 games above 33 points last year.
He had some 30, 35-point games, like a bunch of them.
He had by far the most 30-point games among wide receivers last year. It was a little uncanny in that when he didn't boom, he was outside the top 24. Now, a lot of those were 14, 12, 10 games, so it wasn't like he completely disappeared on you. There were a handful of 1.2, 3.
Yeah, but there were no 20-point games.
Right. It was either 30 or 10. And there was no real in between with Adams. So
that
a little bit more consistent than you're used to in that sense. Even with when he would have those booms, but then always be around the 20 points no matter what with Rodgers. So we did see that downgrade. But yeah, every reason, as long as Jimmy G's healthy, which is a big risk right now, because otherwise I don't know who the quarterback would be here. And there is the risk of a midseason trade. But honestly, just like last year proved with A.J. Brown, I also think it with Adams, he can get it done with no matter who's slinging him the rock. So these are the guys too. I think we didn't necessarily do a huge tier analysis. After these top 7, I do think there's some guys that can be your wide receiver 1, but these are the target hogs, the guys that are well worth that first round addition. Anyone in that top 7, I like taking in round 1 because I'm very intrigued by Derrick Henry and Tony Pollard and Nick Chubb. Some of these round 2 running backs, if you can get a hog like Kupp and then Pollard sitting there on your way back, you've got yourself an incredible start. So I love and hope one of these top 7's my number 1 receiver. If not, I'm satisfied with the next tier we're going to talk about. But these top 7 are definitely where it's at. And if you can make that first round plunge, this is a departure. I've always been a bell cow. I
wanted to ask you this because you've always been a big proponent, and I have tended to agree. We like building a stable. Right. We like building a strong stable with the old RB sometimes, and just look at that stable. We're deviating from that a little bit here because you just listed 7 guys here you'd be thrilled to have in the first round, then come back and get I don't want to call Derrick Henry a lesser stablemate because he's incredible, but this is a change, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. I actually weirdly think there's more depth in the horses this year than the hogs in terms of the true alpha 150 potential target guys versus the 250 plus touch running backs. I think there's more of those 250 potential touch running backs. It seems like that pool has started to deepen over these last few years where it was dry and barren. You look no further than my big board. I have 2 running backs in the first round. The rest are Kelsey and receivers at this point, because I have definitely switched my philosophy. I think there's less injury risk with the receivers. There's just more steadiness year to year. I'm all in on going early receiver at this point.
Wolf says, I mean, it's evolve or die in this business, and the Wolf is not scared to evolve. I agree with you. Makes a lot of sense.
What is up, you fantasy Wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.